Hey, everybody, welcome to module number 2. This is the proposing and then creating or synthesizing your research. And so, what this means is that you're going to say, hey, here's what I want to accomplish. And then you go out and you start gathering those sources. It is really super important to understand the topic before you go do that research. And then using that research that you find, that will allow you to really come up with a strong topic, thesis, focus. You can really kind of really get the paper, a good handle on the paper, but you have to do the research first. You have to know about the topic before you can really start making a lot of decisions about it. And that's what really we're getting at here with this research proposal. We're really trying to step up this idea of here are some questions that I need to answer, here's information I need to find, and here's what's out here, here's what I can really see. Okay. So this overview kind of walks you through that process a little bit. And we're really focusing in on this research proposal. And this is an academic genre, as it says, in which you define a research topic. What is it that you're trying to look up? What is it that we're trying to discover? What is it that we're trying to write about and share? Because you want to be knowledgeable about that topic before you start making decisions on what you're going to do, right? And then I think it's important to think about, why are you wanting to do this? What is it that really drew you to this? We're going to talk about biases, right? And about how when people, engage in a topic, they really have this, there is a bias. There's always going to be a bias, right? How much of that bias can you kind of keep under wraps a little bit? And not that we're trying to trick the audience, but we want to try to stay objective. We want to try to keep ourselves out of this as much as we can, because your audience, especially a skeptical audience or an apathetic audience, is always going to question what you did and why. Why did you do this? If you think about people that write about something and they use themselves as an example, like, look at me, here's what happened to me, or here's this disease I have, or here's this problem that I'm going through, right? The audience is going to question, why did you share that? What were you hoping to accomplish? Were you looking for sympathy? Were you looking for, help? Were you trying to glorify yourself or something, right? So you're always going to, the audience is always going to be questioning your motivations. So I think it's important that you have some understanding of what drew you to this topic and why that's important. Obviously, we want to be reviewing the relevant sources on the topic so we know what's out there. We're going to offer those research questions to help investigate, so when you go out, you know what you're looking for. And then provide a plan for conducting primary and secondary research to help answer that question, right? And what you're saying is, it's like, I now know what I need to go find. Here's how I'm going to go do it, right? Here's how I'm going to do it. Now, it is interesting that in this module, we're going to talk about primary and secondary research. So there's going to be a lot more information, but I'm going to give you the quick overview here. Primary research is information that is created by people that were directly involved, like eyewitnesses, or people that generate new information, like observations. They study this, right? Secondary information is going to be people who collect primary sources, who organize them and evaluate them, and kind of, maybe make commentary on it, right? Evaluate those kinds of things. Those are going to be people who retell the primary sources, right? Or they collect large groups of things and then they use all that to create like a news source, right? So primary, excuse me, sorry about that, right in the middle of the video there, had to sneeze. Primary sources really allow the creator of that content to really share a lot of their own personal feelings and emotions. It really allows you to get that sense of the moment and really what was going on there. Also, too, if it's like new information, like somebody's making observations, you really get to see like the cutting edge of something, right? Like, this is something new. This is something that we don't really know about. And so this person is investigating and sharing that information. The problem with that is going to be is that primary sources tend to be really biased, right? They're emotional. Maybe they're not very clean or polished up. They're random, off the cuff kind of things sometimes, and their initial takes. So they're not always as reliable. Secondary sources tend to be a lot more reliable because you have that time built in, that space built in. So you took all these other sources and you digest them and you pick the best ones and you retell them and you kind of sanitize them a little bit, right? So secondary sources tend to be a lot more objective. The problem is they tend to be they can be clinical. They're boring. They don't have that flair that a primary source would have. Or you do have to question about like the person that collected and curated those sources, the original source material that they used to create that secondary source. Like, what were their biases? What were the things that really kind of controlled how they did that process, right? If you take an example for a second, if you were involved in a wreck, right? Like you're driving down the road and you stop at a stop sign and somebody comes up and rear ends you, okay? You're going to get out of the car and you're going to be really excited. Like, what did you do? Why did you do that? Well, did you not see me? What was going on? And that driver's going to get out and they're going to be kind of confrontational too. Like, I thought you were leaving. Why didn't you pull up? Didn't you see me coming? You should have got out of the way. And then the policeman's going to come and the policeman's going to take both sides of that story, right? And those are going to be very wildly different versions of the same story, even though they're both right there. Those two drivers are primary sources. The policeman's going to take both of those and write a report based on that. And they're going to say things like driver A and driver B, and driver A said this and driver B said this, right? It's going to be kind of clinical. It's going to be kind of boring. It's going to be, flat, but it's objective, right? And so, it kind of changes the tone of those a little bit. So as you're doing your searching, keep those things in mind. It's not that one of these is going to be any better than the other, right? One source is not going to be any better than the other, but you do have to kind of keep in mind that there are limitations or there are things that may make a particular source not as strong as another one. I love this page here that kind of gives you the sense of what are the activities and things that you have to do during this module. Remember, we are doing APA, so you only have to do this assignment. You do not have to do the 8.6 MLA. You're just doing the APA assignment, okay? You get your readings down here. This allows you to see, a lot more information about these different topics, the types of sources, how to utilize them, what to do. You're going to get a lot of really good information from these. And as you get that information, if you still have questions, make sure that you're reaching out for some clarification. And then you get this to-do list of things to do. And I really like that because it really allows you to kind of keep track. Okay, I've done this, and now I've done this. Okay. Let's take a look at the discussion board, the discussion for module number 2. So what you're going to do is by midweek, you are going to post your initial. You're going to post your initial post, right? By Wednesday, January 31st, you're going to have your post up. Then by Sunday, February 4th, you're going to reply to at least 2 other people. Now, the reason that there is that separation, right? Like, could I just go on Sunday and do all of it at once? Well, I mean, technically, I guess you could. But the problem is that if you wait until Sunday, you're not going to get nearly as much feedback from other people as you might, because everybody's racing at the last minute trying to get something in. And people have fewer choices of people to reply to, right? Like, if everybody waited till Sunday, if somebody was trying to work ahead, they're not going to have anything to reply to, right? So it is always important to build in that time and space. So get your initial post up by Wednesday, and then you can do your replies by Sunday night. This topic, we're looking at comparing these secondary sources, okay? And so what we want to do is, in your initial post, you are going to look at this. Find sources on your research question, analyze them, and compare them to the previous sources that you've had. Remember, in Module 1, you had the two sources. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to select one of those research questions that you originally started with, right? You're going to take the feedback you got from other people. If you need to adjust it and modify it, you can do that. That's fine. And then you're going to find 2 more sources that give you some more information, right? That are going to allow you to see the topic in a slightly different light, or maybe in a deeper light, or a more meaningful light, right? You do want to make sure that you have the ability to really understand this topic. And then in a couple sentences, you're going to briefly summarize those sources. Make that assumption that my audience hasn't read them, obviously. So what do they need to know to really understand that? And then you're going to answer these three questions right here. What new information did I get? In what way are the ideas contained in the new source similar than the previous ones? Like, again, one of the things that we talk about with validity of information is that if you keep seeing the same concepts and ideas repeatedly, you have a better, you're a little bit more at ease that that's the right thing, right? Like if you get a source and it's the only one that says this, whatever fact, and it's the only one that says it like that, or the only one that has that piece of information, you have to question why no one else has seen that. And then what kind of publication is each new source? So taking that minute to really think about what is that source, where did this information come from? And then does that help or hurt you in using them? So that'll be your initial post. Your responses then, you are going to find, you're going to read through as many of these as you can, right? It says to choose at least one, but the rubric does say that you have to do two, right? But you're going to go on and you're going to reply to your classmate to give them your feedback on this. Now, I really want to remind you of a few things. First off, detailed and substantive. We want to avoid those things like, I agree, that was good, interesting, right? Like we want to avoid those things. We want to say, that was really interesting. I never thought of it that way. When I read that you wrote this, or this source said this, and you look at how or what kind of new information they brought in, right? Or how they explained it. We really want to respond to what was written. Now, with that, we also want to circle back to this idea of we're not arguing the topic, right? Like this isn't the place to argue the topic. We're not, getting into a conversation about the issue. We're looking solely at how you wrote this, right? Hey, I see that you wrote this idea. This is what I thought of it. Or when I think of this idea, this is, I really appreciate the way that you said it, or it made a whole lot of sense, or I really like the way that you expanded on these ideas, right? You want to be very specific. You want to point to specific details and examples. So when you look back at their post, you're able to point to specific things. You said this, or when you talked about this, or when you included this, right? We want to be able to look at those things because that's going to be able to let them know what sparked this reaction in you, right? Now, in doing your posts, you are going to address two or more of these questions here, right? So you're going to work on those replies by using these kinds of questions or prompts. Now, one thing I will say, when you look at these prompts, these are kind of like they're supposed to get you thinking, right? Like, this one here, there's three different questions, right? I don't know if you have to have like all three of those questions. These are things that make you get thinking, right? And so you respond to things in kind of that vein. All right. And then we're going to look at the next assignment, which is the synthesis grid. And the purpose of this, it's a pre-writing tool. It helps you kind of organize your sources. It helps you kind of at a real quick glance see what things are talking about and being able to see like, okay, here's what they're talking about. Here's where they're coming from. Here's how I might be able to use those sources, right? And this kind of just gives you a nice way of taking that one quick look at something as a whole, right? So it walks you through the step. You're going to download the grid, you're going to review your sources, and then you're just going to fill it out, okay? You're just going to fill that out. Now, I'm going to pull up the blank assignment right here. This is the blank document right here. Sorry, it's a little slow. Here we go. Finally, sorry about that. So here's the document that you're going to use to fill out. Now, you will download this. You can put it in Word, you can put it in Google Docs, whatever you'd like. And then it's really self-explanatory for the first author. Okay, so you're going to put your claim across the top, right? Like this is the thing I'm talking about. And then you're just going to kind of work your way across. So you're going to write down the first author. This is the first person that's talking. What was the title? Whoops. What was the title of that work? What was the theme or issue addressed? What was the thing that they were specifically looking at, right? Then you're going to pull that really useful quote, like, hey, here's an example, or here's a quote, or here's something from the text that really stands out. If I had to boil this down to one instance in the text, this is it, right? Include that in-text citation, because again, we want to get in the habit of doing that so that when you start to pull information, you're in the habit of doing that citation. And then you being able to answer for yourself, do you see bias? Do you see balance? Do you see fallacies? What is your evaluation of this? Now, the nice thing is that they do give you this completed sample synthesis grid, which is popping up right now, that you can take a look at, and it really allows you to see kind of what the expectations are and how this should be completed, right? I do, sometimes I think that people think like, oh, I have to write like tons and tons and tons of stuff, or like the sample is going to be overwhelming. I mean, if you look at this is pretty straightforward. It's about a sentence in each one of these boxes, right? You don't have to do tons of stuff, but it has to be clear. It has to be meaningful, and has to really be, really show me what you're thinking of when it comes to your source material. Now, if I go back to the assignment, at the bottom of this assignment, you'll see the rubric, right? I always recommend going back to that rubric, going back and looking and seeing how would this be graded, right? How am I going to get my points? And so when you're working through this, right, and you look at the sample and you're talking to your peers and you're asking me questions, right, you're thinking about where do I fall in here, right? Where do I fall in? And these descriptors will help you kind of get a sense of where you're at, how you're doing, and what kind of grade you might be getting, or how to get the grade that you want, right? And so you can really look at these descriptors and get a sense of how to do that, okay? Finally, then, we're going to go over here to your last one. This is the Module 2 writing assignment, and this is the research proposal. And we talked a little bit about this before, but the purpose of this assignment is to write the formal research proposal. Okay, so define the research topic. Now, what is it that we're looking at? But think about this. Like it's not about school starts times. It's about starting school later. Okay, wait a minute now. Why? Starting school later to help students be more physically and mentally prepared for the day. So we really want to be able to define the slant or this angle that we're taking, right? Making a case for investigating. Why is this important? What makes this important? What makes this something that people should be thinking about? If you think about like, students needing to be more successful or getting more out of the high school experience, right? Or, so many students now are struggling with mental or physical health issues, right? Like this could be something that helps that, right? And so you're making the case for investigating it. You review the relevant research, okay? You propose the research question. What is the thing you are really focusing and keying in on? And then developing that plan for finding your sources. How am I going to find this information? This critical thinking flowchart is kind of interesting. I like, what do I know? How do I know it? What is important, right? And I think that's one of these really interesting pieces. What is important here? Like, how do I know that this piece of information I really need to share more than this piece of information? What is missing? Like when I think about this, like, how is my audience going to react? Am I going to be able to answer all of my audience's questions with this content, with this material? What is my plan of action? How am I going to get this accomplished? And then how did I do? So afterwards you reflect on this and you're like, okay, I got all the steps, but I don't know if I answered all the questions, right? Or I don't know if I've really taken the time to evaluate what is and isn't important, right? And so you can really go back in there and answer those questions for yourself. It does suggest to go back and make sure that you're familiar with the previous writing assignment, so you're good there. The proposal specifics, it's going to be 3 to 4 pages, double space, Times New Roman 12 point, your basic APA format. Do not have extra spaces between the paragraphs. Again, pretty standard. If you're using APA format, you're going to be doing okay. You have a complete proposal. that really details what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who you're going to deliver it to. You found 4 secondary sources drawn from the Ivy Tech library databases. Okay. Now, on the databases, right? Um, the great thing about the library databases is that all these sources are pre-vetted. We know that they're valid sources. We know that the producer, the publisher, we know they're good. We know they're trustworthy. Now you can argue the information. You can say, like, I don't know if they have like a real good handle on it, right? But they're reputable and they were doing it the right way. Again, remember, we are going to be doing this in APA style. Okay. So make sure that you're using that APA style. And obviously, we're going to be, double checking for spelling and grammar and the things like that. And then again, we have this rubric to really help you kind of break down how this will be graded. Okay. Guys, I got to say, when I took a look at your first module work, I was rather impressed. So many of you were digging in and staying up and were doing the stuff that needed to be done. That was excellent. The fact that you guys were staying on time, that you were communicating with me, that you were asking questions, that was great. I really appreciate the fact that you guys have really jumped into this, right? We're getting ready to enter our 3rd and 4th week. Everything is kind of building. And so, as we go on, these things are going to be building and building and building. So if you think about, like, I've really got to make sure that I'm doing these foundational pieces, these first few modules, I've got to really get these done right. I can't slack on them, because if you slack early, it's going to be really hard to do the project at the end, right? Like that big writing later on. It's really, really difficult. So I really want to encourage you to give your best, to really do your best work. Because this part here, this pre-writing, this researching, this is going to make the end product so much easier to be to complete. So please, as you are working on this, if you have any questions, please continue to reach out to me. Email is the best way to get a hold of me, because I can answer those questions, asynchronously. But if you have any questions or need, please make sure you're reaching out to me. Good luck, everybody.